It's been no secret that so far I haven't been the biggest fan of the Tomorrowverse. After my disappointment with Superman Man of Tomorrow and Justice Society World War II, with really Batman The Long Halloween being the only bright spot for me so far, I was looking forward to seeing a solo Green Lantern movie. Especially one starring Jon Stewart, a character who's great, a great version of the Green Lantern, and the one that most people my age grew up with, being a part of the Justice League animated series. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk about another DC Tomorrowverse movie that totally disappointed me. Today we're talking about Green Lantern Beware My Power, pretty much what comes in the aftermath of Justice Society World War II, the next step in the franchise, and pretty much the next piece of building out this Justice League continuity. What's kind of tough about this one is that I wanted it to be good so bad. I really don't like being this low on this franchise so far. Although the DCAU definitely had its problems, had its weak points, and had some bad movies, I feel like at the very least there were a lot of good ones, and it was overall a solid franchise with solid continuity and pretty reliable quality. But with this, it just feels like another nail in the coffin, and with what I hear about Legion, what I hear about Justice League Warworld, I'm just nervous that I'm never going to get into this franchise and that, I might not find another movie that I enjoy. And that worries me because I love the idea of having this animated continuity outside of the main movies. I assume that Infinite Crisis Part 3 is probably going to be the wrap-up of this universe, which is kind of weird to me. It feels very short-lived, and it feels like these characters didn't have their time to shine and develop and go through arcs. And I don't know if that has something to do with James Gunn wanting to make the whole brand more cohesive, but it just feels like this franchise is going nowhere at this point. Getting into Green Lantern Beware My Power more specifically, it kind of unfortunately continues this really sort of ugly style that I'm not a fan of, to be honest. They do start out with Jon Stewart though, and at least make an attempt to flesh him out as a human being and make him a little more sympathetic. They portray him with the Army veteran PTSD angle, which is interesting and I think could have really made a good center point for this movie. But it just feels like beyond some points when it's convenient, they don't actually explore it, and his arc doesn't really reflect that. But at least for the character, they service him enough as just showing that he's a good guy. They set up this wild bullying scenario with a homeless guy in the beginning so that Jon Stewart can kick their asses and, establish himself as a badass and pretty black and white hero. He's a good guy. It's very simple, but that stuff always kind of works in winning you over and endearing you to a character. It works just fine. They kind of just do that classic Green Lantern origin story, pretty much the same shit that they do with most versions that adapt this character. Alien crash lands on Earth, dying, gives the ring to the person, they get blasted into outer space or whatever. It's all kind of been there, done that. We've seen it all before, and that's fine, but I guess just kind of where it springboards off to just doesn't ultimately end up being that interesting, and it feels like they don't do anything unique enough, but also not anything interesting enough, so it just falls a little bit flat. We get more shoehorned world building in this movie. We get the reintroduction of Martian Manhunter. We get to see Green Arrow for the first time, and Vixen. Green Arrow being the most important of the side superheroes in this story, I'd say. It's kind of weird that they rush their intro considering how low-key slow they try to act like they're developing this universe, but I guess it works similar to Superman Man of Tomorrow, which isn't much of a compliment. Although I have some frustrations with it, I do like the idea that there are other superheroes out there that he can rely on, and that there's history to this universe, something that I think they're going to try and approach with this new Superman movie. But they skip a few steps, just some odd points where it feels like, in theory, this universe should be a lot more well set up than it is. We got a solo Superman movie, a two-part Batman movie. We got a kind of Flash, Wonder Woman mixed type movie with Justice Society, and although those probably should have been different movies, all the pieces are there to continue. Then we get Green Lantern. It feels like a logical place to go next. But for some reason, even though they start so much hotter out the gate in the other universe, for some reason, this one feels more rushed, or I guess just less organic, I don't really know how to describe it. Some of this Green Lantern mythology, it's pretty well established. People know who this character is. Jon Stewart, a little, I'd say he's probably just as popular as Hal Jordan, but they kind of act like you already knew this version of Hal Jordan, and that's a bit frustrating. They kind of present him as dead in the beginning, and then spoilers if you don't want to know anything about this story, but they kind of act like Hal is dead, and then they bring him back, and I'll get to more of that stuff later, but I don't really like the way that he's kind of introduced into this universe and utilized, because he doesn't feel like a person, he feels more like some kind of plot point. Just some of this stuff comes across really odd because they make it feel like I jumped into a random sequel to Green Lantern, or like we had the Hal Jordan movie and now we're jumping in at the Jon Stewart movie. So for some reason, there's something that doesn't quite connect. There's something that just doesn't feel right. Something's missing, and I can't exactly pinpoint what it is, but it feels like it could just be an amalgamation of all these other issues that I feel. I think part of it too is that the movie hasn't developed a working relationship between the heroes, so the context doesn't really make sense. It's just a bit of an odd place to begin the lore, and at the end of the day, they're doing it so that they could shoehorn these characters. I know I use that phrase a lot, but I just don't know how else to describe it. That's kind of what's going on here. I know I hated on Justice Society a good bit, but for all its faults, it actually built out the lore pretty well. I think that it organically established Superman and the Flash's friendship. Some of the alternate universe type stuff did work. Some of it really didn't work, and I hated on it for that. But overall, I think it was taking a step in the right direction. And also the nature of that movie inherently set itself up better for that. But this, I feel like they should have just focused on the Green Lantern, focused on Jon Stewart, focused on Sinestro and the Lantern Corps, but they don't do that. Another thing that's frustrating about it is I feel like Green Lantern and Green Arrow's relationship and their friendship, their dynamic could have been so much more fun. Some of the best stuff, some of the most fun stuff, why I love movies like Thor Ragnarok, it's fun to put superheroes together and have the dynamic that works off that. That's what I think is really going to sell Deadpool and Wolverine, is just these two characters and their dynamic. They could have really sold us on Jon Stewart and Green Arrow, and in very many ways they're alike, but in also very many other ways they're very different. And I think that could have created for just a very interesting aspect to the movie, and if nothing else, just made it more entertaining. But it feels a bit dull and underdeveloped. Just overall, the partnership could have been more fun between them. And I think that they were trying to go for that a bit, but it just comes off as Green Arrow dumping lore on Jon Stewart and just being a bit antagonistic. Then on top of that, some of the events in this movie come off as a bit random, if that makes any sense. It has that kind of dulling action type behavior that alienated me from Just Society, World War II, Superman, Man of Tomorrow. There's just a lack of investment in some of the action, and because of that, when it happens, I just don't feel anything. It overall misses what's fun about animated DC movies. It just falls more into the category of being a bit boring. It's just tough when the character dynamics aren't particularly interesting, and it feels like whenever the story's written into a corner, it doesn't have anything interesting to say or do. It just kind of devolves into having action for filler. I was hoping that there would be stakes, there would be a little bit of weight behind the action occurring, some of the stuff that's going on. I hoped that the conflict would actually be engaging and interesting. Maybe there'd be some ideology, especially with Green Lantern, you're dealing with hope and fear, but these concepts feel like they're put in the back burner, and they're just having fight scenes in action for the sake of having fight scenes in action. And what I hate so much about it is that it makes this stuff just nothing more than noise. Me, as a fan of Green Lantern, my favorite stories are, Blackest Night, Green Lantern Wars, Agent Orange, things that say something about human expression, emotion, or will, but a lot of this feels like very unpassionate standard superhero fare when it could have been so much more. It's also kind of odd to me just how not morally complex Sinestro is at all. He's supposed to be an evil guy, but someone who has convictions, someone who's very convinced of his rightness, and that's what makes very interesting villains. But in this movie, he's reduced to a mustache-twirling villain. They could have explored a little bit more about his trauma, his past, something that made him at least compelling or understandable. But in this, he just wants to be bad for the sake of being bad, and he likes power. That's all you really know about him, and that's not interesting. That's very boring. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the missions in the film, they feel pointless. And it would help if kind of the journey was the point of it, but it doesn't feel like these characters even really develop a bond. I forgot to even mention that Hawkgirl's in it because she's kind of boring in the movie. And I like Hawkgirl a lot. She's an interesting character, but they just don't do anything really with her besides just that rigid character archetype of the badass warrior that doesn't know how to not kill. Getting into even more spoilers, they just kill off Sinestro in such an anticlimactic way. He is the arch nemesis of the Green Lantern. He is the Joker to Green Lantern, and they kill him off like he's nothing. It's just so normie-like. And then if that's not enough, getting back to what I was talking about earlier with Hal Jordan, they totally assassinate his character. This is a version of the character we've never seen before, but but they pretend like we have all this weight and investment in him and that it matters so much when he turns bad. The reason that I'm upset that he turns bad isn't because I love Hal Jordan, which I do, or this version, and that we got to see this version develop and grow. It's because I feel like they're insulting the character by making him bad, even though it's not really his choice, and they make some possessed by parallax excuse. They just absolutely kill it. They kill him, they destroy the character, and those character choices are just genuinely awful to me. I was shocked by some of this stuff. And if that wasn't enough, the cherry on top is that the Green Arrow fucking kills him. He kills Hal Jordan. And then they try to do the classic thing that this universe has done a couple of times where they act like it's this emotional hard decision where it's like, I don't feel anything. I'm just kind of annoyed that you pissed on one of my favorite characters. It's overall just so disappointing. They disrespect him, make him evil, and then kill him, and that's it. That's Hal Jordan for you. Don't ask if he ever pops up again, because he won't. I mean, I'm sure he's in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but as far as this continuity is concerned, Hal Jordan's fucking left in the dustbin of history. And it does not matter, because as soon as they're off this mission, Jon Stewart and Green Arrow go and get some fucking grub. This movie was a huge misstep, a huge mistake. I'm really shocked by some of the decisions that they made in this, and it's overall just another confirmation for me that I'm just not digging this universe. I don't like that I have to be shitting on these movies. I don't like how critical I'm being. I'm really not enjoying these movies. I'm really not enjoying the decisions made with these movies. I just see so much potential in here, and it feels like it gets wasted at every corner. I'm just not sure what else to say about it. I'm just salty as hell. I think it's very annoying. And, you know, getting into the back half of these movies, I just hope that they improve, or at the very least have some entertainment value, fun with the dynamics, especially too because now we're getting into more of the Justice League centric stuff. We're getting Super Legion, which has Supergirl, who I love. We're getting more Batman and Superman for probably the rest of these movies. And I guess we're gonna have to see how it pans out, but as for Green Lantern Beware My Power, just another disappointment in a movie that I'm probably never going to revisit. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Do you like Green Lantern Beware My Power? What are some of the decisions you would have liked to have changed? What do you think that they should have done with this character? I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.